Welcome to the You Are It podcast. My name is Alejandra Orozco. I am a social science researcher and an energy healer. You Are It has been created to support you in expanding your perception of reality. You are loved and absolutely deserving simply because you are, not because of what you have accomplished. Join me and be ready to transform your beliefs and approaches as you enter the flow of becoming one with your highest good and your highest purpose. Dear friends, after an interview I had a few days ago with author Anastasia Myshuk, I realized it would be interesting to those of you who are exploring the relationship between logic and intuition to hear my engagement with such subject, coming from having been trained as a social science researcher, somebody who is meant to observe, analyze, formulate hypotheses, and test them to generate new knowledge, who is now involved in supporting people in addressing emotional and mental blockages or energy blockages, especially when what I do with people I have not been able to measure. Every healing interaction is unique, and I don't even know how, but just that it is possible for us, with the power of intention, to create spaces where others can step into feeling empowered to respond differently and transcend perceptions of stress and physical illness. You are all very welcome. During our conversation, Anastasia asked 5 key questions that really got to the heart of this integration journey. The first one was, your journey blends research and healing. How did you come to integrate science and heart-centered healing? Yes, it doesn't seem to be a usual partnership these days. Yet, they have never been quite separate. As a researcher in East Africa, particularly during my doctoral research, I came face to face with the reality that often no amount of intellectual effort would allow me to support people to feel free, to feel whole, to feel empowered. Their experience of reality was being shaped so deeply by the way they saw themselves, others, and the institutions under which they were operating, that while scientific evidence helped them to fight for their rights, it could barely help them to find inner peace or connect to their own power. In parallel, I was married at the time and raising 2 young, bright souls who demanded I look at myself more deeply instead of telling them to behave. Then I realized I had more changing to do that I was asking those bright souls to do. In 2019, after much struggle between how I was feeling and how I was thinking, I came across psychological kinesiology. And along the way, I realized I had always been guided by my heart, but was trying to address everything through the workings of my mind. My mind was conditioned to operate in certain ways, and my beliefs and emotions, as a very passionate Latina, were shaping and indeed limiting my entire human experience. So I started the journey of changing my ways of seeing the world, and that led to seeing changes in my outer world. What I discovered was transformative. Instead of fighting injustice with anger and resentment, I learned to bring light where light seems absent. Instead of just analyzing problems, I began helping people connect to their inherent wholeness. Presently, I am not married anymore. but I have a kind relationship with the father of my children and such deep friendship with my son and daughter. I feel true joy and passion whether I am engaged in intellectual activity or supporting the healing of a soul. Now, there is an ever-decreasing division between the promptings of my heart and the workings of my mind. Both my research and my healing work serve the same purpose, helping people remember their inherent power and wholeness. The second question was, how do you view your role when supporting someone's healing? So, the title healer is interesting. I feel a healer is someone who is in a conscious process of expansion and remembering, and being in that frequency where you are no longer scared of your own shadows and falling in love with your own light puts you in this frequency where you can support others in connecting to their own light. So, to me, nobody heals anybody else. And you may ask, but how can we feel healed in the presence of gurus, sages, saints, when sharing a space with the sacred? I feel, and I understand, it is because those who are closer to their inner frequency as love and light create and imbue such a powerful field of resonance with divinity itself that they can't help but positively influence the entire field of existence. So, how do I view my role in supporting the healing of others? I help people enter into a state of being where they can, even if momentarily, have a taste of their own beauty, their divinity. I help them connect with their subconscious and support them in releasing what no longer serves them. So living as the light they truly, actually, naturally are becomes their way of being. I can see light even where light seems absent. I can see beauty even in people who can't see themselves as beautiful. And I can tell you, this is a superpower. Sometimes, all it takes is for a soul to be in the presence of someone who loves them without having to fulfill any condition, for them to remember who they really are. This is what I love doing, while using practical tools such as psychological kinesiology, mentoring, and Reiki, and also through my social science research work, which allows me to address real-world problems while exploring patterns of human experience and transformation on both individual and collective levels. The third question was, what is PSYCH-K and how does a session typically work? PSYCH-K was developed by the late Rob Williams. It is a powerful method that helps reprogram the subconscious to transform limiting beliefs and emotional or other forms of stress that may be preventing you from reaching your full potential. It is different from traditional approaches that rely on willpower, affirmations, or positive thinking alone. PSYCH-K works directly with your subconscious mind. The subconscious mind represents about 90% of our brain activity. Thanks to the subconscious, we don't need to learn to walk every morning we wake up. Once information is stored in the subconscious, it becomes automatic. Everything stored in the subconscious, by design, is meant to stay there. So, if your subconscious holds the belief, for example, that you are not good enough, that belief will shape your entire material experience. Our subconscious minds often contain outdated programming, beliefs that create an illusion of separation from our authentic spiritual nature. PSYCH-K is a non-invasive and interactive process that creates what we call a whole brain state. A PSYCH-K facilitator guides you through a process called a balance. Under the whole brain state, conditions of powerlessness and limiting perceptions of self are transformed, and this opens the door to creativity, clarity, and transformation. A balance allows the facilitator and the partner, who is the person receiving a balance, to have a safe, gentle access to subconscious reprogramming with the help of applied kinesiology. Sessions typically last about an hour. Depending on your goals, you may work through multiple issues in just one sitting. And the coolest part, PSYCH-K sessions are equally effective in person, online, or even by phone. The fourth question was, how has your global perspective shaped your understanding of the connection between land, food, and inner healing? Before my exposure as an observer and sometimes as a researcher to the richness of social and ecological landscapes in Colombia, Tanzania, Canada, Mexico, Kenya, Ghana, and some parts of Europe, I was pretty clueless about how conditions of self-empowerment, self-sovereignty, service, social cohesion, and a deep sense of humanity had so little to do with physical environments. In fact, I witnessed how physical environments were shaped by, rather than being drivers of self-empowerment. These conditions were so deeply connected to cultural practices, inner awareness, and individual and collective perceptions of reality, which profoundly influenced human activity, institutional arrangements, and human-nature interactions. The connection to food, which is my favorite thing in the world, was particularly fascinating. In every culture I visited, I noticed that people's relationship with food mirrored their relationship with themselves and nature. In communities with strong land connections, people also had healthier relationships with their traditional foods. Indigenous communities showed me how food is medicine when we see ourselves as connected to nature rather than separate from it, whether it was enjoying buying fresh milk from automatic dispensaries in communities around the Dolomites in northern Italy, having a beautiful coffee ceremony in Ethiopia, First Nations in Canada sharing pieces of raw salmon and their knowledge of the healing properties of plants, or communities on the coast of Tanzania who, having only basic means of subsistence, celebrated access to food as sacred nourishment. The pattern was clear. When people feel safe, worthy, and whole, they naturally make decisions that honor their bodies and the environment. Within every physical environment and every culture, you find both people deeply connected to the land and in harmony with nature, and people who see themselves as separate from nature, determined to pursue personal gain at the expense of everyone and everything else. In all places and within all cultures, you find those who have a deep sense of reverence, who can see beauty around them and contribute to the creation of beauty because they have found their own inner beauty. The more you can see your own light, the easier it is to be a light for others. And this shows up in how you nourish yourself and care for your body. The fifth and last question I am sharing here was, how can people balance scientific knowledge with intuition in their healing? From my experience, I can share that the separation we make between scientific knowledge and intuition is more of an illusion than anything else. All praiseworthy scientific effort is inspired by intuition. There is no real separation, but there is a perception of separation or a literal artificial separation. Let me share a real-life example to illustrate this connection. In my early stages as a facilitator of PSYCH-K, I learned that one of the most important people in my life had recently been diagnosed with a stage 4 cancer, the final stage. She was one of the first persons I started my practice with, and I walked with her through the process of assessing her approach to healing. Something important to mention here. I think it was Einstein who said, all knowledge is experiential, and truly, whether you gather data and information from a lab that eventually becomes knowledge, like a researcher, or from your daily interactions with Mother Earth, as indigenous peoples do, you are accumulating knowledge. That knowledge can be connected and addressed in relation to our inner guidance and awareness, the awareness of self. As a divine creation, a being of light who is temporarily having a body in this plane of existence, you are connected to infinite knowledge. This connection is facilitated by your intuition. Back to the story. When we visited the doctor that was going to start chemotherapy for this dear soul of mine, the moment we stepped out of his office, I asked her, "This is your decision. You are always making a choice." She had just been told she would die of it and needed chemo for the rest of her days. So I continued. So now, I am here to support you in making a conscious choice, and I will be with you in whatever you choose to do. Do we simply accept what we are being told by a person with scientific knowledge, or do we explore other possibilities? She was truly worried and experiencing some level of fear, but also had little more to lose, so she accepted the challenge. The moment she opened up and decided to be sovereign over her body and her decisions, instead of being driven by and reacting with worry and the fear of doom she had just experienced, she literally changed her frequency, and new doors opened to her. From a different medical practitioner, she heard about something called immunotherapy, a treatment that supports the body in healing itself by providing extra support to the immune system. She combined that action with changing her residence, changing her diet, reconnecting with loved ones, and constant accompaniment on my part to explore the beliefs and emotional distress that were calling out for attention and healing. Both approaches, chemotherapy and immunotherapy, were scientific, but such a difference in their nature. The first approach said, "You are dying, submit to chemo until the end of your days," while the second said, "Your body has healing capacity, let's support it." Facing that challenge invited her to make a conscious choice to become sovereign and let go of fear. And as she did this, she realized that only one of the approaches honored her wholeness, offered her the possibility where she was not completely subdued or controlled by external circumstances. Once she moved away from the perception of being a victim to the awareness of having the power to shape her reality, nobody could stop her. She had joined the frequency of remembering her wholeness. She went for immunotherapy, and within a year, her body was almost completely cancer-free, except for the point on the left kidney where it started. Soon after, she healed completely, and there are no recurring symptoms. Now, she roams the world as a traveler, enjoying life in her 70s. Scientific knowledge that comes from paradigms based on oneness, harmony with nature, natural foods, and harmony with all beings and things in existence will always be recognized by your intuition. For us to hear our intuition, we are being invited to know and accept the fact that we are always being guided and loved beyond measure. So, these were the key questions and my answers during the interview. Yet, I recognize that I am in this messy middle ground because for traditional Newtonian science and pure non-dual transcendence perspectives, for example, I don't fit the mold or could be seen as mistaken. You see, a Newtonian scientist may appreciate that I draw on empirical evidence on whole brain states, may appreciate the systematic approach PSYCH-K uses, and even my academic background and cross-cultural research. Yet, they will be concerned because, for example, the lack of peer-reviewed research on PSYCH-K. The fact that terms such as frequency, light, and divinity are scientifically meaningless without operational definitions. They could also point out how the claim that beliefs directly shape material reality is not supported by a large body of established research on causation principles. Moreover, the integration I am talking about could be seen as baseless and more like a spiritual language dressed up with academic credentials rather than true integration. And on top of all of it, social science, geographic research credentials do not qualify me to make medical or psychological claims. For non-dual perspectives, there might be an appreciation of how I recognize the wholeness of every human being, my emphasis on seeing people's light, my understanding of how healing happens naturally and from within, and yet I can be fully challenged by the fact that through my practice of PSYCH-K, I am still giving too much importance to the mind and beliefs, when the real path is recognizing they are all illusions. Furthermore, all the talking about healing and transformation keeps us trapped in the story that something is wrong or needs to be fixed, when that very perspective is what could cause something to be wrong. Even further, true awakening relates to seeing that there is no person to heal. This reinforces the ego-mind structure. I, included, am trying to go beyond. Furthermore, integration suggests the mind has value when liberation comes from recognizing the fundamental unreality of the mind. And yet, I also know about quantum physics, consciousness research, Dr. Hawkins' work on levels of consciousness, Dr. Caroline Myshuk's work on energy medicine, psychoneuroimmunology, epigenetics. Truly, there is a whole body of research that bridges what I am integrating. The gap is not in the science, but rather in the lived experience of integration. So many people haven't yet heard of this body of science and still operate under an old paradigm, like those based on Newtonian physics. There is institutional resistance. Universities, medical systems, research funding still heavily favor reductionistic approaches. There is cultural conditioning. We are trained to see spirit and science as separate, even when the research shows otherwise. And of course, personal integration is messy. Even when you intellectually know and draw on consciousness research, embodying it in daily practice while maintaining academic credibility is challenging. So, what I am sharing is really about the human experience I am going through as I integrate mind and heart. I am navigating this messy middle because the broader culture, institutions, and many of the people I interact with haven't integrated this knowledge. The cultural lag between what consciousness research has already proven and how most institutions and people still operate is big. In fact, there is a well-documented phenomenon in science called the knowledge to practice gap or research to practice gap. It typically takes 15 to 20 years for scientific discoveries to be integrated into mainstream practice. But wait, there is more. The consciousness research I have mentioned, quantum mechanics, has been around since the 1920s. Hawkins' work since the 1980s. Psychoneuroimmunology since the 1970s. But these more holistic paradigms are yet to penetrate mainstream institutions. And this may be creating the messy middle many of us are experiencing. Indeed, don't you love it when you can see that from a different perspective or from a higher point of view, what we are so invested in could be just mistaken, unimportant, or illusory? Yes, the scientific language I use draws from my training and research. It is not novel, nor meant to bring a new logic and intuition integrated science. Yes, the spiritual concepts could be more grounded in measurable outcomes, and the integration stories I share are personal journeys rather than methodological synthesis. So, am I truly bridging worlds? Or am I rather a spiritual or energy healer with academic credentials? And all that I can think of is that I am in this messy middle. I don't understand myself. I honor both empirical observation and intuitive knowing. I feel that my personal journey has been one of integrating both. I am not here to dismiss science or spirituality, as I see the power in both of them. And my global exposure to different peoples and environments and research informs my perspectives on healing. In all honesty, there is no perfect integration in my approach. I am standing between heavily guarded and recognized paradigms, letting my heart guide my process. There is no seamless integration in what I do. What I have witnessed is that even in this messy middle, there are people torn between these worlds who could be positively impacted by my approach. At present, I am not trying, not able to fit neatly into any existing box that satisfies well-established paradigms. I am in that liminal space, that bridge between worlds, I'm facing this paradigm shift resistance, even within myself. Imagine operating in an evidence-based practice that hasn't achieved cultural legitimacy yet. This is what I can do presently. This is where I am. This is what I have learned. This is how I can serve at this moment. I just couldn't stay safely on one side or the other. And now I inhabit this messy middle. And now what I hope most is that the people who approach me for healing, you listening to this podcast, the source reading my content, and all who I encounter, upon witnessing this messy middle I stand on, may go beyond just getting healing and information to feel encouraged to allow themselves to be complex, integrated beings who don't have to choose between their intellect and their intuition, their research of the material world and their reverence for the divine in all that is. So I invite you all to embrace the complexities and contradictions of human existence and to fully welcome heart and mind, and where you can, to hold multiple perspectives as you embrace ambiguity. Allow yourselves to question your approaches and your approaches to be questioned. Allow yourselves to stand in uncertainty, to keep growing and integrating while genuinely exploring and creating. Allow yourself to be someone willing to be beautifully, courageously human, vulnerable, messily authentic, while simultaneously holding a space for the sacred. My goodness, I do love you all absolutely dearly. Me llamo Alejandra, and you just listened to Bonus 2, Episode 25 of You Are It. Until next time. Rumi once said, "You search the world for treasures, but the real treasure is yourself." This is the essence of our message on the You Are It podcast. You are the treasure waiting to be discovered or enjoyed. You are the flame that never consumes itself and the light that shines everywhere. Now you are home. Please know that you are most welcome. Stay tuned as we look forward to sharing something of value on every episode.